Childhood in black neighborhoods during the 1970s and 1980s was defined not by what money could buy, but by what imagination could create. While television commercials showcased expensive toy stores and the latest plastic gadgets, black children were building entire worlds from cardboard boxes, bottle caps, and whatever else the neighborhood had to offer. These weren't just toys, they were lessons in creativity, resourcefulness, and the kind of ingenuity that generations of black families had passed down as survival skills wrapped in play. The laughter that echoed through those streets came from pure imagination, and the memories created cost nothing but meant everything. What were these magical playthings that transformed ordinary objects into extraordinary adventures? 1. Cardboard box forts and houses. A refrigerator box arriving in the neighborhood was like Christmas morning for black kids. Within hours, that simple cardboard container would transform into an elaborate fort, a spaceship, a store, or even a mansion complete with hand-drawn windows and doors. Children would spend days decorating these structures with crayons, markers, and whatever craft supplies they could find. The boxes became sacred spaces where kids could escape, create their own rules, and build entire imaginary worlds. Neighbors walking by would see these cardboard kingdoms set up in driveways, yards, and even on sidewalks, with children posted as guards or shopkeepers. These cardboard creations represented more than just play. They were early lessons in architecture, design, and the power of seeing potential in what others might discard. Black mothers and grandmothers understood this. They would save appliance boxes specifically for the kids, knowing that a 50-cent purchase could never bring the same joy as a free box and unlimited imagination. The forts taught children that wealth wasn't measured in dollars, but in creativity, and that the best things in life often came from seeing value where others saw trash. 2. Tin telephones. 2 empty soup cans a length of string, and suddenly you had a communication device that felt like magic. Black kids would punch holes in the bottom of Campbell's or Del Monte cans, thread string through them, and create telephone lines that stretched across yards between porches and sometimes even between apartment windows. The excitement of hearing your friend's voice travel through that taut string never got old, no matter how many times you played with it. Kids would spend entire afternoons perfecting their tin telephone networks, experimenting with different string lengths and sizes. The tin telephone was more than a toy. It was a lesson in physics, problem solving, and the importance of communication. In communities where long-distance phone calls were expensive and many families shared party lines, these homemade devices gave children a sense of independence and connection. Grandmothers would save cans specifically for this purpose, washing them carefully and removing the sharp edges. The toy represented the ingenuity of black families who taught their children that you didn't need fancy electronics to stay connected. You just needed creativity and string. 3. Bottle cap game pieces. Bottle caps from sodas like Nehi, Shasta, and RC Cola became currency in the neighborhood economy of play. Kids collected them obsessively, trading them like valuable commodities and using them for countless games. They served as checkers pieces on homemade boards drawn in chalk, as markers for hopscotch squares, and as betting chips in competitive street games. Some children would flatten them with rocks to create smooth game pieces, while others preferred them with the ridged edges intact. The sound of bottle caps clinking in a child's pocket was the soundtrack of summer. These humble pieces of metal represented resourcefulness passed down through generations. Black communities had always made do with what they had, and bottle caps were the perfect example. Free, abundant, and infinitely useful. Children learned to see value in the ordinary, to recognize that fun didn't require a trip to the toy store. Parents appreciated that their kids could entertain themselves for hours with nothing but found objects, teaching lessons about thrift and creativity that would serve them throughout their lives. 4. Rubber band balls. Building a rubber band ball was a rite of passage, a project that could span weeks or even months. Kids would collect rubber bands from newspapers, vegetables, mail, and anywhere else they appeared, starting with a small core, maybe a crumpled piece of paper or a marble. They would wrap rubber bands around it, layer by layer, watching their creation grow. The pride in showing off a grapefruit-sized rubber band ball was immense. Some kids kept theirs going for years, the balls becoming dense, heavy objects that bounced with unexpected vigor. The rubber band ball taught patience, delayed gratification, and the satisfaction of building something substantial from nothing. In Black households where money was tight, this toy represented the values parents wanted to instill: persistence, resourcefulness, and pride in your work. Kids would compete to see whose ball was biggest, but the real victory was in the discipline required to keep adding to it, day after day. It was a lesson disguised as play, teaching children that great things were built slowly, one small addition at a time. 5. Stick horses and broomstick steeds. A worn-out broomstick or a sturdy tree branch could become a magnificent horse with just a little imagination. Black kids would find the perfect stick, sometimes adding a sock or paper bag to create a horse's head, and gallop through neighborhoods recreating westerns they'd seen on television. The clip-clop sound effects were provided by the rider, and races between stick horses were serious competitions. Some children decorated their steeds with yarn manies and drew faces on sockheads, creating unique characters that had names and personalities. These stick horses represented freedom and adventure in communities where horseback riding lessons weren't an option. Black children created their own rodeos and ranches, turning streets and vacant lots into the Wild West. Parents smiled at the simplicity of it, a toy that cost nothing yet provided hours of active, imaginative play. The stick horse taught children that adventure didn't require expensive equipment, just a willing imagination and the courage to gallop freely through your neighborhood. Reins held high. 6. Paper dolls cut from catalogs. The arrival of the Sears or JCPenney catalog was like getting a free toy store. Black girls would carefully cut out models from the pages, creating entire wardrobes and families. They'd spend hours arranging their paper people in imaginary homes, creating elaborate stories and scenarios. The best catalogs were fought over. Everyone wanted the Christmas edition with its toys and fancy dresses. Girls would create entire neighborhoods of paper people, drawing homes for them on notebook paper and furnishing these spaces with more catalog cutouts. This wasn't just play, it was early fashion design, storytelling, and world building. Young black girls who might never own the clothes in those catalogs could dress their paper dolls in the latest styles, imagining different lives and possibilities. Mothers and grandmothers encouraged this play, understanding that it sparked creativity and let children dream beyond their immediate circumstances. The paper dolls taught resourcefulness and showed that you could create beauty and fun from what arrived free in the mail. 7. Mud pies and dirt kitchens. A patch of dirt, some water, and whatever containers you could find. That was all you needed for a dirt kitchen. Black kids would create elaborate outdoor kitchens, using old pots, plastic containers, and dishes that were no longer needed in the house. Mud became chocolate cake. Dirt mixed with grass became casserole. And special pebbles were ingredients to be carefully selected. Children would serve their creations to friends, and the most creative cooks had reputations in the neighborhood. Some kids added flower petals for decoration or used sticks as utensils, creating full dining experiences. These dirt kitchens were more than messy play. They were early culinary training and lessons in hospitality. In Black culture, where feeding others is an expression of love, even pretend cooking carried weight. Grandmothers would contribute old bowls and spoons to the outdoor kitchen, and mothers accepted dirty clothes as the price of creative play. The mud pies taught children about mixing, measuring, and presentation, skills that would translate to real kitchens later. It was play that honored the tradition of Black women as creators and nurturers, passed down to the next generation through dirt and water. 8. Acorn caps and tiny whistles. Acorn caps found under oak trees became miniature tea sets, construction materials for fairy houses, and decorative elements in children's art projects. Black kids collected them in pockets and jars, treasuring their perfect cup shapes. Some children learned to make whistles from acorn caps by blowing through them just right, creating high-pitched sounds that annoyed adults but delighted other kids. The caps were strung into necklaces, glued onto cardboard to create designs, and incorporated into countless imaginative games. These tiny natural treasures taught children to observe their environment and find beauty in small things. In neighborhoods where parks might be few, but trees still grew, acorns were nature's gift to children's creativity. Black families had long traditions of using what nature provided, and acorn caps continued this legacy. Children learned that entertainment didn't have to come from stores. It fell from trees, free for anyone willing to look down and see the possibilities. 9 newspaper fashion shows. Old newspapers became runway material in the hands of creative black kids. Children would fold and tape newspapers into elaborate dresses, hats, and accessories. Then stage fashion shows for the neighborhood. Girls and boys both participated, creating avant-garde designs that would make today's Project Runway contestants proud. The shows had music, someone's radio, or a child singing, and commentary from the designer about their creation. Audiences of parents, grandparents, and neighbors would gather on porches to watch these performances. The newspaper fashion shows represented more than dress-up. They were expressions of black creativity and style, even with the most basic materials. In communities rich with cultural tradition, but sometimes poor in resources, these shows taught children that elegance and artistry came from within, not from expensive materials. The activity encouraged confidence, public speaking, and design thinking. Black parents understood that their children were learning to hold their heads high and command attention, valuable skills they would need throughout their lives. 10 rock collections and trading. Certain rocks and pebbles became treasures based on their color, shape, or the way they felt in your hand. Black kids would collect interesting stones, keeping them in shoeboxes or jars, and trading them like precious gems. A perfectly smooth, white stone might be worth 3 interesting colored ones. Kids developed expertise, knowing which vacant lots or creek beds had the best specimens. Some children painted their rocks, creating ladybugs or fish, turning simple stones into art objects that decorated windowsills and shelves. Rock collecting taught geology, negotiation, and the art of seeing beauty in the ordinary. Black children learned to observe carefully, to categorize and organize, to assign value based on rarity and desirability. These were business skills disguised as play, lessons in economics that didn't require a textbook. Parents appreciated that rock collecting got children outside, exploring their environment, and developing patience as they searched for special specimens. It was free entertainment that taught children to treasure what the earth provided. 11 clothespin dolls. Wooden clothespins from the laundry line became dolls with distinct personalities. Black kids would draw faces on them with markers, wrap them in fabric scraps to create clothes, and use yarn for hair. These simple figures became characters in elaborate stories, whole families, or students in pretend schools. Some children created entire wardrobes for their clothespin people, carefully sewing tiny outfits from material their mothers and grandmothers provided. The dolls were portable, easy to make, and each one was unique. The clothespin dolls represented the sewing and crafting traditions passed down in black families. Grandmothers teaching children to wrap fabric around clothespins were passing on skills that had sustained their community for generations. These weren't just toys, they were lessons in resourcefulness, in creating beauty from utilitarian objects, in making something personal and special from what others might overlook. The pride a child felt in their handmade doll was the pride of creation, of making something from nothing. 12. Dandelion bouquets and flower chains. Dandelions growing in yards and empty lots became precious flowers in the hands of black children. Kids would pick them by the dozens, presenting bouquets to mothers and grandmothers who received them as if they were expensive roses. Children learned to split the stems and link them together, creating long chains that became necklaces, crowns, and bracelets. The white dandelion puffs were made into wishes. Blow the seeds away, and your dream might come true. These simple flowers taught children about nature's beauty and the value of thoughtful gestures. Black mothers who received dandelion bouquets put them in water glasses on kitchen tables, honoring the love and effort behind the gift. The flower chains were lessons in patience and fine motor skills. as small fingers worked to connect one delicate stem to another. This was play that cost nothing but taught children to see beauty in what others called weeds, to create joy from what grew freely in the earth. 13. String games and cat's cradle. A loop of string and nimble fingers could create dozens of different patterns. Black kids would master cat's cradle, Jacob's ladder, and countless other string figures, passing them from hand to hand in intricate sequences. The games required concentration, coordination, and often cooperation between two players. Children would challenge each other to create the most complex patterns, or to keep a sequence going as long as possible. The string would travel between kids, each one adding their variation to the pattern. String games represented mathematical thinking and spatial reasoning disguised as play. In Black communities where educational toys might be scarce, a simple loop of string taught geometry and problem solving. Grandmothers and aunties would show children patterns they'd learned decades earlier, connecting generations through string and fingers. The games required nothing but string, no batteries, no plastic parts, no instruction manual. They taught children that entertainment could be elegant, portable, and endlessly variable, all for the price of a shoelace or yarn. 14. Shadow puppets on sunny walls. A sunny day and a blank wall created a theater for Black kids' imaginations. Children would position themselves to cast shadows on buildings, creating animals, monsters, and characters with their hands and bodies. The shows became elaborate, with stories narrated and multiple children contributing shadow figures. Some kids became known as the best shadow puppeteers, able to create recognizable birds, dogs, or rabbits. On summer evenings, porch lights and street lamps provided the illumination for shadow shows that entertained entire blocks. Shadow puppets taught children about light, perspective, and storytelling. In communities where television might be a single shared screen or non-existent, kids created their own visual entertainment. Black oral storytelling traditions found new expression in shadow form, as children combined narration with visual performance. The games cost absolutely nothing, just sunlight or artificial light and imagination. They taught children about their own bodies as tools for creation and about the power of working together to tell stories. 15. Walnut shell boats. Finding walnuts meant finding boats. Black kids would carefully crack walnuts, eat the nuts inside, and transform the shells into tiny vessels. A toothpick mast, a piece of paper for a sail, and a drop of candle wax to secure everything turned half a walnut shell into a seaworthy craft. Children would race these boats in puddles after rainstorms in buckets of water, or in any stream they could find. Regattas were organized, with multiple boats competing while kids cheered on their creations. The walnut boats represented ingenuity and the ability to see potential in what others would throw away. Black children learned that play didn't require plastic store-bought toys. It required vision. The boats taught basic principles of buoyancy and wind power, hands-on science lessons that stuck because they were fun. Parents appreciated that their children were learning to create rather than consume, to see possibility in the remnants of a snack. Each boat was unique, a reflection of its creator's style and imagination. 16. Grass whistles. Learning to make a blade of grass whistle was a skill passed down from older kids to younger ones in Black neighborhoods. The trick was finding the right kind of grass, wide enough and firm enough, then positioning it between your thumbs just right and blowing hard. The resulting screech was triumphant proof of mastery. Kids would spend entire afternoons perfecting their technique, creating concerts of grass whistles that drove adults crazy but bonded children together. The skill became a marker of growing up. Younger kids looked up to those who had mastered it. Grass whistles were lessons from nature, teaching children to work with what grew freely in every yard and park. The patient practice required to master the whistle taught persistence and attention to detail. In Black communities with strong oral and musical traditions, even the simple skill was valued. It was making music from nothing, creating sound from the most basic material. The grass whistle represented the cultural value placed on musical expression and the creativity that could turn anything into an instrument. 17. Cardboard tube telescopes and swords. Paper towel tubes and wrapping paper tubes never made it to the trash. They became telescopes for exploring the neighborhood, swords for epic battles, and megaphones for important announcements. Black kids would decorate them with markers, cover one end with colored plastic wrap to create filter views, or tape multiple tubes together for extra-long telescopes. Sword fights with cardboard tubes were serious business, with rules and honor codes. The tubes were lightweight enough not to cause real harm, but sturdy enough to feel like real weapons in a child's hands. These simple cardboard cylinders taught children about imaginative play and respectful competition. In neighborhoods where kids played outside until streetlights came on, cardboard tube battles brought children together for active, creative play. Parents appreciated that the tubes were safe, free, and kept kids engaged for hours. The telescopes encouraged exploration and curiosity about the world beyond immediate surroundings. Whether spying on neighbors harmlessly or searching for imaginary pirates, kids learned to see their familiar neighborhood as a landscape of possibility. 18 popsicle stick creations. Every popsicle consumed meant a building material saved. Black kids collected these wooden sticks religiously, using them to build miniature houses, fences, picture frames, and sculptures. With glue made from flour and water or borrowed from school supplies, children constructed elaborate projects. Some kids painted their creations, while others left them natural. The most ambitious builders created entire villages or elaborate sculptures that won praise from family and teachers. Schools sometimes featured these popsicle stick creations in art shows, giving children pride in their resourcefulness. The popsicle stick projects taught engineering, planning, and the satisfaction of building something substantial. Black parents who saved every stick from ice cream treats and frozen pops understood that these weren't just trash. They were materials for education. The projects required patience, precision, and problem-solving skills. Children learned about structure, stability, and design. The pride in a completed popsicle stick project was a pride of having created something tangible and beautiful from what would have been thrown away. 90 milk jug scoops and ball games. An empty gallon milk jug with the bottom cut off became a scoop for catching and throwing balls. Black kids would create their own lacrosse-style games, developing complex rules and team competitions. The plastic jugs were perfect, lightweight, durable, and free. Some children decorated their scoops with paint or permanent markers, creating personalized equipment. The games evolved to include obstacles courses, long-distance throwing contests, and relay races that got entire neighborhoods involved. These homemade scoops represented the sporting spirit in Black communities where organized youth sports might be less accessible. Children created their own athletic traditions, setting up tournaments and keeping careful score. The milk jug games taught hand-eye coordination, teamwork, and strategic thinking. Parents appreciated that their children were getting exercise and learning cooperation through games that cost nothing. The scoops showed that athletic equipment didn't have to come from sporting goods stores. It could come from the recycling pile and imagination. 20 button spinners. A large button and 2 pieces of string created a toy that would spin so fast it blurred. Black kids would thread string through the buttonholes, creating loops on either side, then twist and pull rhythmically to make the button spin. The hum of a button spinner at full speed was distinctive and satisfying. Children would compete to see whose button could spin longest or fastest. Some kids decorated their buttons with markers, creating hypnotic color patterns when spun. The toy was simple, but required skill to master. Button spinners taught children about centrifugal force and rhythm, hands-on physics lessons wrapped in play. In Black households where buttons were saved in jars for mending clothes, there was always material for this toy. Grandmothers would contribute buttons that were too damaged for actual sewing, but perfect for play. The spinner represented the tradition of teaching children through play, of making learning physical and fun. It cost nothing, but provided endless entertainment and subtle lessons in persistence. Getting that button to spin properly took practice. 21. Leaf rubbings and nature art. Leaves collected from neighborhood trees became art supplies when placed under paper and rubbed with crayons. Black kids would create entire collections of leaf prints, comparing the different patterns from oak, maple, and other trees. The activity combined nature exploration with art, as children learned to identify trees by their leaves while creating beautiful prints. Some kids would arrange multiple leaves under the paper to create complex designs, or use different colored crayons for rainbow effects. The finished rubbings decorated refrigerators and bedroom walls. Leaf rubbings taught botany, art techniques, and observation skills. Black parents and teachers encouraged this activity because it got children outside, learning about their environment while being creative. The art required only paper, which could be paper bags or newspaper, and crayons or pencils. It showed children that art materials existed all around them in nature, free for the taking. The leaf rubbings represented the connection between Black communities and the natural world, teaching children to see trees not just as shade, but as sources of endless patterns and beauty. 22. Tin can stilts. 2 large tin cans, some sturdy rope, and yet stilts that made kids feel 10 feet tall. Black children would punch holes near the closed end of cans, thread rope through to create handles, and practice walking on their elevated platforms. The learning curve was steep, many falls and much laughter accompanied the mastery of tin can stilts. But once a child could walk, they felt powerful, seeing the world from a new height. Stilt races and obstacle courses became neighborhood competitions, with kids developing surprising agility on their can platforms. The tin can stilts taught balance, persistence, and overcoming fear. Black parents who watched their children practice understood that this was more than play. It was learning to get back up after falling, to keep trying despite frustration. The stilts required no money, just 2 identical cans and rope. They represented the value placed on physical skill and determination in Black communities. Kids who mastered their stilts walked proud, having conquered a challenge through nothing but practice and courage. 23. Sock balls. When a sock lost its partner, it found new life as a ball. Black kids would stuff socks with other old socks, tie off the end, and create soft balls perfect for indoor play or playing in spaces where a hard ball might break windows. These sock balls became the equipment for countless games: catch in a living room, makeshift baseball in narrow alleys, or gentle games with younger siblings who might get hurt by harder balls. Some families kept a specific sock ball for years, adding to it as more orphan socks appeared. The sock ball represented the waste not, want not philosophy central to Black households. Every item had potential for reuse, and a missing sock was an opportunity, not a loss. These softballs taught children that play spaces could be anywhere. You didn't need a field if you had a sock ball in a hallway. Grandmothers who couldn't afford to keep buying balls appreciated that kids could make their own. The sock ball showed children that fun didn't require pristine equipment. It required creativity and the willingness to play with what you had. 24. Penny toss games. Pennies became both the game equipment and the prize. Black kids would draw circles on the ground, set up cups or holes, and create elaborate penny tossing challenges. The rules varied by neighborhood. Sometimes you won all the pennies that landed in your circle. Sometimes you kept only what went in the cup. The clink of pennies hitting pavement was the sound of competition and the hope of winning a few extra cents. These games taught children about probability, strategy, and friendly gambling before they understood what any of those concepts meant. The penny games represented economic education through play. Black children learned to calculate odds, manage small amounts of money, and accept losses gracefully. Parents generally allowed these games because the stakes were low, but the lessons were valuable. The pennies were found money, discovered in couch cushions, given by grandparents, or earned through small chores. The games taught that even small amounts could provide entertainment, and that the thrill of competition didn't require high stakes. 25. Homemade kites from paper bags and sticks. Paper grocery bags, wooden sticks, or thin branches, string, and tape were all you needed to build a kite. Black kids would construct these flying machines, decorating them with markers and crayons, adding newspaper tails for stability. Finding the perfect wind conditions became a neighborhood event, with children running through empty lots and fields to get their creations airborne. When a homemade kite actually flew, staying up for more than a few seconds, the achievement felt monumental. Kids would spend days perfecting designs, learning through trial and error what worked and what sent their kites straight to the ground. The homemade kites represented aspiration, literally and figuratively. Black children who built these flying machines were learning engineering principles through experimentation. Each failed flight was a lesson in design and aerodynamics. Parents watched their children persevere through frustration, understanding that kite building taught resilience and problem solving. The joy of seeing your own creation soar on the wind was pure magic. Proof that with creativity and determination, you could make something extraordinary from the most ordinary materials. These paper bag kites didn't come from stores. They came from imagination, patience, and the belief that you could build something that would fly.